It's James with Net News Ledger, and we're talking with the Anishnawbe Business Professional Association and Jason Rasevych about an upcoming conference. Jason, welcome to Net News Ledger.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's an interesting way of doing business today. You're doing a virtual fireside meeting to talk about, how things can be done for finding Indigenous-led natural climate solutions. What do our readers and viewers need to know, Jason?
Yeah, well, the Anishnawbe Business Professional Association has been providing ongoing information to our members on a regular basis through our monthly e-newsletter. And what we decided to do is come more frequently with a type of fireside chat. And for this one, we're calling it a virtual campfire chat. And each month, we're going to be introducing new topics and new speakers. And to kick off 2021, we've decided to focus on a unique topic that doesn't get a lot of mainstream coverage, and that is nature and carbon, and how Indigenous-led climate change solutions could assist with overall climate change in our country.
So who are going to be the speakers at the virtual campfire?
Well, we've got a panel that we've identified to bring them in, and these speakers disciplines from their backgrounds. We've got David Flood from Wakatoan Development GP, an Indigenous forestry company. Chris Adjeknoam of Oracrest Gold, Lac Sioux First Nation. Colin Schwanamash of Agoki Development Corporation. Stephen Naita, Indigenous Leadership Initiative. Joseph Pallant of Eco Trust Canada. And Jamie McKinnon of Blue Source and Amanda Reed of Nature United will join the panel. These speakers, there's a mix of Indigenous speakers that have some role related to development corporations within their traditional lands, related to either forestry, mining, or other financing projects. And then there are these experts that have some technical capacity related to looking at what is happening in the field of carbon credits, carbon offsetting, and looking at the potential framework, regulatory framework for getting into this business. And I guess the purpose of this was there's a lot of First Nations across Canada that are hearing about the carbon tax that's coming in the year 2022 at $30 per ton. And it's set to increase every year by $15 to be up to $170 per ton by 2030 by the federal government. There's a big plan with the federal government to invest in not only climate change solutions, but clean energy related to renewable projects, reducing communities' usages of diesel for remote communities, and then looking at other unique ways with energy efficiency and conservation related to home retrofits and so forth. So this is just one of the spokes in the overall plan for Canada to reduce GHG emissions. But for First Nations, we haven't really been involved in a lot of discussions related to carbon, and in the past related to the cap and trade with Ontario's former program that was recently scrapped. But this is a new area for us, and it does provide opportunities for business and for revenue and for management, and understanding of how to get into this business is kind of what we're planning to do with this first panel.
Now, one of the things for Indigenous communities, of course, is that a lot of the northern communities in Northern Ontario, for example, are on diesel generators for their power. And that means that in the winter, truckloads of diesel are driven up. In the summer or in the other parts of the year, and sometimes it's flown up, which is very expensive. The opportunity to go green, what kinds of things could be done in northern communities?
Well, there's a lot of opportunity related to exploring kind of what are the gifts of the Creator that has provided based off of the land, the air, and the waterways. And there are communities that are studying potential projects related to renewable energy, whether that's utilizing the sun or looking at river flows to to build a hydro project, or to look at biomass. And back in, I think it was September, there was an announcement that was made to support 13 million from the federal government, from Natural Resource Canada, that would explore biomass and bioheat projects for remote First Nations in Northern Ontario. So we're seeing a lot of different innovations that have come forward, and a lot of communities have gone through an era of managing their own local distribution based off of diesel. And it's been the fuel source that's been polluting remote communities, that's been expensive, and like you mentioned, with traveling and moving it into communities, the delivery of it, every year with climate change, there's less and less of an opportunity to get it into communities, and the cost just skyrockets when you have to fly it in. Communities are looking to expand, and it's tough to expand a community that's on diesel, and the heating costs are just uneconomical to heat a home or a building based off of their space requirements of space heating. To do that on a diesel fuel or an oil fuel is expensive, and there needs to be new approaches and new ways, and that's what's currently being studied. But the whole carbon opportunity related to forest lands, and a lot of these groups that have taken the next steps to forest tenure, they're able to identify potential opportunities to say, if we're able to be involved in this system and there's a huge polluter of GHGs that are over certain thresholds, like a mine or a pulp mill, they're going to need to buy carbon offsets in the future. And it's important that First Nations understand what's within their traditional lands, where they could go start on carbon accounting to see what their potential is, and then to potentially negotiate an opportunity, an atmospheric sharing benefits agreement is what the Great Bear Rainforest Group of Indigenous groups in BC started back in 2009, 2010. They really set the precedent. And the rest of the country is now looking at that model related to Indigenous groups to see how they did it and what worked well and what didn't.
And that's an area where, probably with technology today, because of the pandemic, people are using, Zoom meetings, and they're meeting people from all over the world and all over across Canada. Is that something that you're finding, the ability to communicate so widely, so quickly that, a year ago we never thought of?
Yeah, definitely. There's more cross-country dialogue that is happening, and networking related to these meetings. But it does pose challenges with communities that are remote, that do not have broadband fiber optic, and it puts these communities at a disadvantage. And there is a commitment from the government to, I guess, to level the playing field. But that is another economic opportunity that First Nations could explore. So a lot of the remote communities, and even rural road access communities, the last mile from the First Nation to the adjacent municipality to connect to the telecommunication system isn't upgraded, and it's usually the municipality that gets the funds to upgrade with the large telco. But the First Nation copper system that's within the First Nation community, it's usually a copper coax system, and it takes time, it takes proposals, and there's a bureaucratic process just to get a simple upgrade. So when you hear of all of these meetings that are happening coast to coast, there's the cities and the urban centers that do have superior services to some of the remote First Nations and rural communities that don't have that high quality, efficient, and high speed service.
That's been a big one that we've been covering and hearing about. There's the Starlink process coming forward, and they're testing that. And we do a call in with Eric Malilo, the Kenora MP, and there's times when his internet literally isn't enough in Kenora area to handle the call. And I know when I've been further north, I think the fastest internet I've ever used was at Bearskin Lake, or no, it was Muskrat Dam, sorry. And in the band office, that was just massively fast. But again, it was that last mile issue. It didn't get to the homes. And that's been the next step that, the government has talked about as well.
Yeah, the advent of fiber to the home is a concept that many indigenous groups are preferring for their on reserve or inter community infrastructure. The remote communities have relied on Telesat and the C-band dishes for a long time, and like you mentioned, the large buildings, the large institutions that have resources to pay for SatLink or ExploreNet or these other service providers are doing it at a cost to run education systems, to run public services for their community membership. But the households, do not have those types of resources. And those are the ones where you have residents that will then have families, and a lot of these communities are facing overcrowding. So every year there's youth that have tablets and new devices and that are being brought into the household and are trying to connect to a Wi-Fi network that's hooked up to a satellite. And at times it becomes very difficult for them to be able to share that connection, and even with the gaming system. So it's somewhat of a crisis in some of the communities related to how they communicate externally, both from a First Nation perspective of running band administration, but also a community perspective as a whole, to be able to just live. And being broadband being deemed as an essential service a few years ago, of all the discussion at the United Nations level, it's very important for the federal and provincial government to make those key strategic investments into First Nations that need it and that are behind. And there's some real unique things that are going on with First Nations taking ownership of the long haul fiber network to a community, and then ownership of the local community network, and potentially running some operations as well. So we're seeing a good mix of things that are happening.
So we'll keep in touch on the conference, the online virtual campfire series. We'll be sharing it here on Net News Ledger. How do people get involved, Jason? How do they join this conference?
Well, there's a few ways. We're starting the discussion now related to how people could get involved on our social media. www.anishnawbebusiness.com is one of the ways that people could go onto that webpage, click the button to register. It's free to register. It'll be redirected to a site where you fill out your contact information, and you'll be getting a link to log into the event that day. The panel would be virtually, so you'll be able to, as long as you have good high-speed internet connection and services, you shouldn't have any issues with attendance that day. We are going to be recording the event as well, and there'll be a few ways to submit Q&A as well during the event. But you could also email questions to me at info@anishnawbebusiness.com prior to the event. And we're going to be looking to set up a message board as well, to be able to have some post event feedback. So we're really excited about it. It's January 29th, coming up a few weeks from now, and looking forward to everybody attending.
Jason, thank you for taking the time to talk to us and to share with our readers and viewers.
Thank you very much for having me.
Stay in touch, stay informed, hit subscribe. Make sure that you know what's happening. This is James with Net News Ledger for Anishinaabe Business Professional Association.